Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if Your Life Depended on It by Chris Voss. This is a great book. I'm all in on Chris Voss. I've also watched his masterclass. He's even better in a visual and vocal format. So you might consider getting the audio of this version because I think he reads it to you. So I'm not going to go through all the techniques. Chris Voss is a former FBI negotiator turned, you could say, expert on negotiation, and he speaks to all sorts of groups. And there's lots of different techniques he offers. I'm just going to focus on a few of them that I really like, one that I use in particular all the time, so that you can contemplate what Chris would put forward, which is we're always negotiating. We're negotiating all the time. It's just that we're not aware of it. And that negotiation is about win-win. It's not just about getting a good deal for yourself, it's getting a good deal for the other party and creating an environment, a world in which that's what we're seeking. So, in brief, that's what it is. Let's get into the text itself. Chris Watts came back on the phone, trying to act like nothing had happened. He was a little rattled, that's for sure, but now he was talking. "We've identified every car on the street and talked to all the owners except one," I said to Watts. "We've got a van out there, a blue and gray van. We've been able to get a handle on the owners of all of the vehicles except this one in particular." "Do you know anything about it?" "The other vehicle's not there because you guys chased my driver away," he blurted. "We chased your driver away?" I mirrored. "Well, when he's seen the police, he cut." "We don't know anything about this guy. Is he the one who was driving the van?" I asked. The mirroring continued between me and Watts, and he made a series of damaging admissions. He started vomiting information, as we now refer to it in my consulting business. He talked about an accomplice we had no knowledge of at the time. That exchange helped us nail the driver of the getaway car. And now he explains what mirroring is. Mirroring, also called isopraxism, is essentially imitation. It's another neurobehavior humans and other animals display, in which we copy each other to comfort each other. It can be done with speech patterns, body language, vocabulary, tempo, and tone of voice. It's generally an unconscious behavior. We are rarely aware of it when it's happening, but it's a sign that people are bonding, in sync, and establishing the kind of rapport that leads to trust. It's a phenomenon and now technique that follows a very basic but profound biological principle. We fear what's different and are drawn to what's similar. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Mirroring, then, when practiced consciously, is the art of insinuating similarity. Trust me, a mirror signals to another's unconscious. You and I were alike. Once you're attuned to the dynamic, you'll see it everywhere. Couples walking on the street with their steps in perfect synchrony, friends in conversation at a park, both nodding their heads and crossing their legs at about the same time. These people are, in a word, connected. While mirroring is most often associated with forms of nonverbal communication, especially body language, as negotiators, a mirror focuses on the words and nothing else. Not the body language, not the accent, not the tone or delivery, just the words. It's almost laughably simple. For the FBI, a mirror is when you repeat the last three words, or the critical 1 to 3 words, of what someone has just said. Of the entirety of the FBI's hostage negotiation skill set, mirroring is the closest one gets to a Jedi mind trick. Simple, and yet uncannily effective. By repeating back what people say, you trigger this mirroring instinct, and your counterpart will inevitably elaborate on what was just said and sustain the process of connecting. Psychologist Richard Wiseman created a study using waiters to identify what was the more effective method of creating a connection with strangers, mirroring or positive reinforcement. One group of waiters, using positive reinforcement, lavished praise and encouragement on patrons using words such as great, no problem, and sure in response to each order. The other group of waiters mirrored their customers simply by repeating their orders back to them. The results were stunning. The average tip of the waiters who mirrored was 70% more than of those who used positive reinforcement. So I was taught a technique similar to mirroring called reversing in Sandler sales. And this was to not only give you some time and space to reflect on what you wanted to say, but usually clarified something because you weren't really sure about what the person was saying. So someone could say, well, I've got to check with my team. So reversing in Sandler was, well, when you say you've got to check with your team, what do you mean by that? And that is what I have used. I've used that technique probably every week of my life since 2008. And it's because so often in our week, in our month, in our year, we're running into situations where someone says something that they know what it means, but you may not know what it means exactly. And what you can do to find out exactly what it means is to ask. Now, Voss's technique of mirroring is to simply repeat with a lilt at the end. So it would be something, going back to the example I gave, say, well, I've got to check, you're asking for a decision, and the person says, I've got to check back with my team. So Voss would say, check back with your team. So it's a little quicker, and it mirrors using the exact language, and that's what he's talking about, that FBI negotiation tactic. I think either is acceptable. I think probably the challenge for me of picking up Voss's technique, which I probably read Voss's book in 2018, I had spent 10 years using reversing as a clarification. When you say you want to check back with your team, what do you mean by that? I'm still using the essence of mirroring, which is I am cutting and pasting what the person said to me. They said, I want to check with my team. I lift that, and then I put that into a statement that I own, a question that I own. And it's a technique you can use in life outside of what you think is a standard negotiation, just for clearing things up, whether that's with your friends, with your family. They might, someone, you're trying to take your siblings out. They say, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure about that. And you're just like, well, when you say you're not sure about that, what do you mean? And I know it sounds silly. It feels, in a sense, somewhat artificial. But once you get used to it as a technique and you see the results it generates for you, I promise you'll be sold. So just think about mirroring, as Voss puts it, or reversing, as I was taught, as a way to get more information and to give both parties some time to reflect on what was just said, and to give you more time and space for a decision or reflection. Something else I like about Voss is what a technique he calls an accusation audit, which is to overshoot the mark on the worst things that a counterparty might think or say in a given situation. On the first day of negotiating class each semester, I march the group through an introductory exercise called 60 Seconds or She Dies. I play a hostage taker, and a student has to convince me to release my hostage within a minute. It's an icebreaker that shows me the level of my students, and it reveals to them how much they need to learn. Here's a little secret: the hostage never gets out. Sometimes students jump right in, but finding takers is usually hard because it means coming to the front of the class and competing with the guy who holds all the cards. If I just ask for a volunteer, my students sit on their hands and look away. You've been there. You can almost feel your back muscles tense as you think, oh, please don't call on me. So I don't ask. Instead, I say, in case you're worried about volunteering to roleplay with me in front of the class, I want to tell you in advance, it's going to be horrible. After the laughter dies down, I then say, and those of you who do volunteer will probably get more out of this than anyone else. I always end up with more volunteers than I need. Now look at what I did. I prefaced the conversation by labeling my audience's fears. How much worse can something be than horrible? I diffuse them and wait, letting it sink in and thereby making the unreasonable seem less forbidding. All of us have intuitively done something close to this thousands of times. You'll start a criticism of a friend by saying, I don't want this to sound harsh, hoping that whatever comes next will be softened. Or you'll say, I don't want to seem like a jerk, hoping your counterpart will tell you a few sentences later that you're not that bad. The small but critical mistake this commits is denying the negative. That actually gives it credence. In court, defense lawyers do this properly by mentioning everything their client is accused of, and all the weaknesses of their case in the opening statement. They call this technique taking the sting out. What I want you to do here is turn this into a process that, applied systematically, you can use to disarm your counterpart while negotiating everything from your son's bedtime to large business contracts. The first step of doing so is listing every terrible thing your counterpart could say about you in what I call an accusation audit. This idea of an accusation audit is really, really hard for people to get their minds around. The first time I tell my students about it, they say, oh no, we can't do that. It seems both artificial and self-loathing. It seems like it would make things worse. But then I remind them that it's exactly what I did the first day of class when I labeled their fears of the hostage game in advance, and they all admit that none of them knew. So, by putting those fears out, you don't give your counterparty a chance to hold them in reserve and ponder them. You just put that out there and say, it's going to be horrible, let's go for it anyway. Or, it's going to be horrible, and wait. What about the word no? This, I think, is counterintuitive. In negotiations, outsiders might think, oh, I want people to say yes. And Voss here in this particular group of passages is talking about the power of no. Politely saying no to your opponent, calmly hearing no, and just letting the other side know that they are welcome to say no has a positive impact on any negotiation. In fact, your invitation for the other side to say no has an amazing power to bring down barriers and allow for beneficial communication. This means you have to train yourself to hear no as something other than rejection and respond accordingly. When someone tells you no, you need to rethink the word in one of its alternative and much more real meanings. 1. I am not yet ready to agree. 2. You are making me feel uncomfortable. 3. I do not understand. 4. I do not think I can afford it. 5. I want something else. 6. I need more information. Or 7. I want to talk it over with someone else. Then, after pausing, ask solution-based questions or simply label their effect. What about this doesn't work for you? Or, what would you need to make it work? Or, it seems like there's something here that bothers you. People have a need to say no. So don't just hope to hear it at some point. Get them to say it early. And what that does is it gives you, once again, time and space. And as I'm reading some of those points, you might be thinking of people you deal with in your life. Perhaps I'm thinking of some older people in my life where no really means I don't understand. So because I don't understand, it's uncomfortable, so I have to say no. Or I need more information, meaning they might say yes, but because they don't know and they need more information, they say no. So no doesn't always mean no in this negotiation process. As you can see, no has a lot of skills. No allows the real issues to be brought forth. No protects people from making and lets them correct ineffective decisions. No slows things down so that people can freely embrace their decisions and the agreements they enter into. No helps people feel safe, secure, emotionally comfortable, and in control of their decisions. No moves everyone's efforts forward. So don't be afraid of no. It's part of the negotiating process. If you're enjoying this content, consider hitting like, subscribe. It's a free way that you can support this channel. Last thing I'm going to talk about is the 738-55 rule. This comes from a study, and it talks about the power of body language. In 2 famous studies on what makes us like or dislike somebody, UCLA psychology professor Albert Mehrabian created the 738-55 rule. That is, only 7% of a message is based on the words, while 38% comes from the tone of voice and 55% from the speaker's body language and face. While these figures mainly relate to situations where we are forming an attitude about somebody, the rule nonetheless offers a useful ratio for negotiators. You see, body language and tone of voice, not words, are our most powerful assessment tools. That's why I'll often fly great distances to meet someone face to face, even when I can say much of what needs to be said over the phone. So how do you use this rule? First, pay very close attention to tone and body language to make sure they match up with the literal meaning of the words. If they don't align, it's quite possible that the speaker is lying or at least unconvinced. When someone's tone of voice or body language does not align with the meaning of the words they say, use labels to discover the source of the incongruence. Here's an example. You. So we're agreed? Them. Yes. You. I heard you say yes, but it seemed like there was hesitation in your voice. Them. Oh, it's nothing really. You. No, this is important. Let's make sure we get this right. Them. Thanks. I appreciate it. This is the way to make sure your agreement gets implemented with no surprises, and your counterpart will be grateful. Your act of recognizing the incongruence and gently dealing with it through a label will make them feel respected. Consequently, your relationship of trust will be improved. And this requires courage on your part to go past what seems to be socially unacceptable. When someone says yes and they don't really mean it, but it's on you to go past that. So in the sense, it's the mirror of the no that we saw earlier, where someone says no, and you use that as context to keep going. Here, they say yes, and you could just say, okay, great, see you later. But instead, you see that their yes is a kind of yes. And so instead of accepting their kind of yes, you want to go for a full yes. And so you keep digging and say, well, what else? What else is there? What else can I help you with? What's not quite right? So there's plenty more, as it's a fairly thick book. I want to say about 300 pages. But yeah, just a little under 300 pages, actually, about 270 with an index. But I only picked out 4 or 5 stories. There's lots more stories in here. Interesting on its own, just getting a look into the life of a hostage negotiator. But what's more fascinating about books like this one, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, is taking those battlefield lessons, those field tested ideas, and putting them into everyday life, whether they're in business, whether they're with fellow coworkers, whether they're with your family members, whether they're with friends. All of these things matter because human relationships are at the heart of all of this. When you're talking about hostage negotiations, or when you're talking about negotiation in general, at the heart of it is human relationships. And being good at human relationships is an important life skill. And understanding negotiation tactics and tools can help everybody go for a win, not just benefiting yourself, but benefiting everyone. So Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. If you enjoyed this review, hit like, subscribe, share it with people who you think might be interested. If you'd like to buy a copy of it for yourself, there's a link in the description below. That's one way that you can support this channel. You can also support this channel by sending a PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee. Thank me for this presentation. If you want to thank me on an ongoing basis, you can support my work through Patreon or YouTube membership. That's linked below. You get early access to videos like this one, a chance to chat with me behind the scenes, as well as get access to videos that I don't release to the general public. If you want to nominate a book for the future, you can find my Amazon wishlist below. You'll see all kinds of books there, books about France, Palestine, general topics, obviously books about Palestine are from my Palestine Bookshelf project, books about France for the Americans in Paris, which is another project I work on. But otherwise, you'll find all sorts of books, and that's for this channel, Stephen Heiner. So consider buying a book, sending it my way, effectively sponsoring the video, and I will do my best to review it in a timely manner. Until next time, enjoy your reading.